So for someone watching or listening who is hearing this and says, okay, I understand this, but maybe they might be asking, well, isn't the weather patterns changing every decade or 100 years, and it's getting warmer, then it'll get colder, then it'll get warmer.
Why
and it's
would it
just
get colder? What makes anybody say it'll get colder?
I have
when
no idea.
Armies of scientists, climatologists, people who study this point out that it's not going to get colder. It's only getting warmer and warmer. And as they say, especially Kate Marvel is really well spoken about this. Suppose there were extraordinary temperatures in West Texas and India and Southeast Asia. Suppose there were extraordinary temperatures and we didn't know why it was happening. Suppose it was just a mystery. That'd be really spooky. But we do know exactly why it's happening. We, humankind.
Why is it happening?
Because we put extra carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the air very fast. And this is what we tell everybody, wah, 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 wah. It's the speed that we're doing it. Yes, in ancient dinosaur times, there was 2.5 times as much carbon dioxide as there is now in the air. It's the speed that we're doing it. And now, instead of 1 or 1.5 billion people, we have 8 going on 9 billion people, all trying to breathe and burn in the same atmosphere, and this is going to be trouble. But you got to be optimistic, Lewis.
Yeah.
If you're not optimistic, you're not going to get anything done.
For sure.
We're playing ping pong, table tennis.
We're
I
having
was
fun.
optimistic that I could, take a couple points from you. I may have been delusional, but that was, if you don't think you can win the game, you're not going to win the game.
Interesting.
If you don't think we can address climate change, then we won't.
What's it going to take for us to actually make a change?
So vote, everybody, vote. What can I do about climate change? And what people want to hear generally is recycle your plastic, which is good.
It's not enough.
Recycle,
Not big
it's
enough
not
change.
nearly enough. Furthermore, the fossil fuel industry, and look, we're all got here because we have fossil fuels. I understand that, but we have to stop. We have to stop using fossil fuels the way we're using them now. Not slow down, stop. And so get politically active in your community and elect people who are going to do something about this. And the things that I want to do about it are to have these big goals. Big goals. In the overarching big sense, what do we want to do? Raise the standard of living of women and girls. When you raise the standard of living of women and girls, everybody is better off.
Benefits, yeah.
You know the old saying, happy women and girls, happy life. I paraphrase. When women have a higher quality of life, they have fewer kids. The kids they do have more resources. They do better. Everybody does better. In the community, in the city, in the farm, in the world. So for this, 3 things: clean water, renewably produced electricity that's reliable, and access to the internet, or whatever the kids call the internet in the future. The electronic superhighway is what we used to call it back in the 1900s. So having these big goals in mind, we can make these big changes.
Right.
And when you talk about Texas and the extraordinary heat, here's an irony. And did you know that? I used to work in the oil field.
Really?
As a young engineer.
Wow.
A Seattle company had the premier oil slick skimming boat. The Coast Guard, made of aluminum, lightweight. Coast Guard could take them on helicopters, put them at the oil slick, and lap up the oil slick. So there was a derivative technology of doing what may seem like the trivial enterprise of separating oil and water. In the Permian Basin, did everybody watch Friday Night Lights? An older reference. In that area, when you pump up oil, the verb they use is produce oil. Ancient plants produce the oil and microbes. When you pump up the oil, you pump up a lot of very salty water.
Interesting.
And the oil, interesting, well said. The oil sticks to dust particles and these little particles become neutrally buoyant. They don't sink or they don't float, and they plug up all the valves and everything. So I worked there for a couple of years on this gizmo, and the smell of oil is everywhere. Their pumps are everywhere. You go to West Texas, they're everywhere. Well, now they're wind turbines on the same plane. And there's so many wind turbines and so much solar energy and so many batteries in Texas this year, 2023. How many wind turbines, solar panels, and batteries are there? There's so many that they haven't had a catastrophic electricity event that they had a couple of years ago, because they've supplemented their power with renewable source, conventional, unexotic renewable sources. And so even with that, legislators there are fighting it. They're fighting the renewable.
Really?
It's just, you
'Cause of
guys,
money.
come on.
Yeah.
Well, somebody's making money. Are you old enough to remember T. Boone Pickens? His kids.
The name? Yeah.
It's the kids. Anyway, he was a fossil fuel bazillionaire, but he argued that he argued for using natural gas as what he called the bridge fuel to renewable, and he was heavily invested in wind energy in Texas.
Gotcha.
That's still a good idea. So let's go, people. Let's get her done.
I want to ask you about this, because for those watching and listening and saying, okay, I hear you, I believe it, I understand it, and I'm going to take action on it, right? But I feel a lot of stress in my heart and my mind.
Yes.
My relationships are struggling.
Yes.
I don't understand my brain
Yes.
or my mind and how these things work and how to master these things.
Master.
Or how
Yes,
to
I'm working
understand it and have more calm and peace in my own life, to let alone go fight some fight about climate change when I'm stressing and struggling about money, relationships, and understanding my mind. So I'd love to hear from your perspective about anything you've learned, again, personally or through science, on how to first understand our brains, our minds, how things work, the way we think, and how we relate to ourselves, so that we can have more peace and harmony in our own space before we try to conquer space and mastering that. I wonder if you can share some thoughts there.
So people nowadays, they talk about mindfulness. That's a modern word. It's what I have for many years, decades, called pay attentivity. Pay attention, people. It's not that easy, I guess. But another interesting thing, we did the old show, the Science Guy show. We had an expression, no bit to exceed 45 seconds, which was not a rule so much as a guideline for you Ghostbusters buffs. And so...
now it's like 4 seconds on the internet.
But see, and then it's also comforting to note that Socrates complained about the youth of today. Socrates, these young people, they have no respect. Same thing, people. And so I am not claiming to have all the answers, but paying attention is of great value. And there's two ways to be rich: have more or need less. It's easy enough to say. But when it comes to climate change and your general anxiety, doing something about it makes you feel better.
Sure.
In my opinion.
Of course.
Just doing something.
For sure.
Get politically active.
For sure.
And keeping in mind that's hilarious. Keep in mind that just recycling newspapers
It's
aren't
not
gonna do
enough.
it.
Yeah. We got to get active in other ways.
Which is easy to say, but hard to do. And we're living at this extraordinary time.
Sure.
It's, I'm so old. How old? I remember when Nixon resigned, and it was a big deal. High school and college, Nixon resigned. That's nothing compared to what's going on now. It's a hilarious comedy joke compared to what's happening now.
Right.
So let's get to work, people. Come on.
For sure. What have you understood about your own thoughts or your own mind over your 30-plus year career in really bringing science to the world, to the masses? What have you understood about the way you think, the way you feel?
Here's one thing for sure. Accepting that when you present people with overwhelming evidence, the first time human nature, you don't change your mind. You've had a lifelong belief. Whatever it is, astrology, haunted houses, going to a psychic and hearing from your grandmother.
Santa Claus.
Just a second.
Maybe real.
And keep in mind, Santa Claus is magic. Yes, he can be in many, many places at once, and he takes many forms. This is not rocket surgery, okay? This is, I think, you can show pretty convincing evidence that Santa can be in more than one place at a time. And then also, he lives at the North Pole, everybody. Santa lives at the North Pole because 90% of the people on Earth live north of the equator. I mean, he's got work to do. He's got things he's got to get done. So he lives where it's more accessible to the world's land masses where people live. I mean, that I won't say it's obvious, but if you think about it, it's susceptible to analysis.
Sure.
So,
what beliefs have you had to change in the last 30 years?
The one that I got in trouble with and now I get respect for was genetically modified food, genetically modified organisms. So I am still active with the Union of Concerned Scientists, which was started by a couple of guys, Kurt Godfrey especially, who were very concerned about nuclear weapons and the Oppenheimer, the movie's coming out right now and all, and the documentary about him, and very concerned about nuclear weapons. Well, now we are concerned about global problems writ large. I guess if it's global, it's writ large. And so I believed or accepted the idea that humankind did not need to genetically modify crops, that there are enough resources globally that you could just create new species or modify species through conventional means by mixing pollen and ova, the way Thomas Jefferson is supposed to have done. And this is my representation of wheat pollen, by the way.
Sure.
Obviously. But now I've come to accept the idea that we're much better off modifying crops. Yeah. And by we, I mean we can feed more people more efficiently. And the reason we have 8 billion people going on 9 billion people is because we've been able to feed them. And the people may not realize the first breakthrough in genetically modified crops was in cotton. That getting cotton plants that were not susceptible to boll weevils eating them. I got to have a home. That's an old song. The boll weevil explaining to the farmer he's got to eat the cotton because, sorry, dude, I need a home. Whereas the farmer's thinking, it'd be better if you weren't here, Mr. Boll Weevil or Ms. Boll Weevil. So genetically modified crops, I've changed my mind. And I've gotten respect in the scientific community about it.
But why are they against genetically modified foods and crops?
So there's two things. And I think the main thing is genetically modified crops have enabled industrial farming on a very large scale, not just big, but very large. And people are troubled by that consolidation.
Right. It's kind of taking up the land from the smaller farmers.
Yeah, and so Thomas Jefferson, again, had this vision of an agrarian society where we all lived on farms, raised our own food, and lived off the 18th century grid. But that's not what people want. People want to live in cities and do stuff. And I tell people all the time, I used to work at Boeing, and we have a whole thing now where everybody's working at home, everybody's working remotely, virtually. When you build airplanes that can fly close to the speed of sound with extraordinary reliability day in and day out, you can't do it at home. You need to have thousands of people come together with a plan and a giant building to build stuff.
Right.
That's how it is. And so I think a fear of industrial farming has led people to oppose genetically modified food in general. But there's no reason, there are reasons, we could modify our regulations so that giant corporations don't crush people and make their lives unlivable and so on. And the other big thing that's become representative of genetically modified organisms or crops writ large or big is the use of these genes to prevent insect attack and to enable extraordinary weed control. If you're a farmer, if you're a gardener, weeds are a drag, man. Yeah. You're fighting weeds all the time. So the classic example is glyphosate. Roundup is the brand name. And people love to hate Monsanto, which I can understand. Monsanto's been absorbed, everybody. There's no Monsanto anymore. And as people have pointed out, Monsanto was not as big as Apple or Microsoft or Boeing. It was down in the lower 300s of the top 500 companies. I mean, it was successful, but it wasn't like this monolith, transformer crushing cities or something. And so there's two things about glyphosate. It's scary because it kills weeds so effectively. And the second thing is everybody uses it. Every farmer who wants to stay in business and compete uses something akin to glyphosate or genetically modified crops. So, we in the States are all about corn. Corn's in everything. We're made of corn. We all eat corn. The plastic is corn.
Right.
Well, you wouldn't have all this corn without genetic modifications that keep the European corn borer invasive species from destroying corn crops. And that is understanding DNA so well that you could, and so that this protein produces a crystal in the corn borer that kills it, can't tolerate it, or doesn't eat it because it can see it coming. In the insect sense. And so this leads to my biggest idea. Everybody, we have to accept that humankind is in charge now. We are running this planet. We did not apply for this job. Nobody filled out a form, but we are in charge now. Everything every one of us does affects everybody in the world because we all share the air. Nobody you meet and have a conversation with is not breathing. If you're a mortician, I guess, you take meetings with people who aren't breathing. But we all share the air. And so when I was a kid, intuitively, you would think nature's over here. We're going to go camping in the woods. We're going to take an axe and a hand axe and cut our own firewood, and this is going to be great. And nature's over there and we're over here. But now we're all in this everywhere all together.
Right.
And so what we want is to have systems of governance, systems in place that take that into account, that preserve the environment for everybody so that we can all have a high quality of life. Easy to say, not so easy to do.
Right.
Back to you.
What did you believe? Or not even you, what was in the science community that was so backed, maybe as you were getting into your show 30 years ago and over the last 30 years, something that was known to be true in the world, in the scientific world,
Oh, well.
that has later been evolved into something else, and you realized, oh, actually, this is not true. What is?
Well, this is a cosmological thing, and I mean that cosmology. When I was young, everybody presumed the universe was expanding, and not only was it expanding, it was slowing down. There's no sound in space, just be. But and this had ramifications about our place in the cosmos and what happened before. Is there any such thing as before the Big Bang? Is that even a question? But now, going about 2004, it was proven the universe is accelerating, getting bigger, faster, and faster. And do you know why? Nobody knows why. So here we go. So you've heard of dark matter, dark energy. So it has some gravity. Nobody's really sure where it comes from, pulling everything apart. And I think about my grandparents, all four of whom were born in the 19th century. All four of my grandparents were born in the 1800s. They did not know there was relativity, let alone what it would lead to. And so in their lifetime, they saw relativity discovered. They saw the neutron discovered, protons proven to donate and accept in acids and bases. And then they saw nuclear weapons, and they saw nuclear energy, and they saw this understanding of the cosmos, and they saw they were around for the invention of the word Big Bang, the phrase Big Bang, and the invention of black hole. These were things that no one knew existed in the 1800s. Just think, 30 years from now, when somebody figures out what dark energy and dark matter are, just think where it could lead. People don't know what side of the street they're on until they look at their phone, and your phone depends on both special relativity, the speed of spacecraft relative to the Earth, and general relativity, the speed of time as influenced by the Earth's gravity. Whoa, dude, just think what could happen in 30 years. Focuses the mind, as they say.
What do you focus your mind on these days the most?
Well, there's a couple of TV things I'd like to do, movie things I'd like to do. But let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Why doesn't every